Good evening. I'm Deborah Zarin. I'm talking to you about the role and importance of clinical trial registries and results database. I'm the director of ClinicalTrials.gov, and we will go through some of the basics. Most of the material is in the actual book chapter, so I think I'm going to try to focus on a few of the more interesting points and leave some of the details to your reading. So this is the outline of what I'll be covering tonight. So the real question is, why is disclosure important? Why do we exist at all? And for that, it's helpful to think about evidence-based medicine. And the concept of evidence-based medicine is that clinical and policy decisions should be informed by evidence regarding the benefits, risks, and other burdens associated with all possible alternatives. Clinical trials are a key component of the body of scientific evidence that must be used to make decisions, and most decision makers depend on summary data from journal articles. But then what's all the fuss about? Well, the suppression of research results impedes the scientific process, and the suppression of clinical trial data compared to other research data is particularly problematic, and that's because trials depend on human volunteers who put themselves at risk, and the trial results inform our medical decisions. So there are three key problems with the evidence base. Not all trials are published. When published, the publications don't always include all of the pre-specified outcome measures. And sometimes unacknowledged changes are made to the trial protocol that would affect the interpretation of the findings. Here's a sort of infamous example. There were a few scandals that kind of instigated the current phase, the modern phase, if you will, of trial reporting. And this was a study of celecoxib, otherwise known as Celebrex, compared to other NSAIDs. And it was the study was looking at the propensity to cause ulcers. So the vertical axis is the cumulative percentage of participants who had an ulcer complication. And you could see here that the red line for celecoxib makes it appear as if celecoxib was less likely to cause ulcers than the comparator drugs. And in fact, these results were statistically significant, and this was published originally in JAMA, showing that celecoxib was the better drug in terms of ulcer complications. However, it later became apparent that the study was a 12-month study, not a 6-month study. And you could see that at 12 months, celecoxib looks no better than the two comparators. And in fact, it was pre-specified in the protocol as a 12-month study. So the pre-specified primary outcome measure was the probability of ulcer complication at 12 months, not at 6 months. The problem is when they published the 6-month data, they already had the 12-month data, but the journal editors and the peer reviewers of JAMA didn't know that these data were available. So you can imagine researchers sitting around looking at the data for 12 months and saying, the results don't look very good for our drug. What should we do? And then they noticed that the 6-month data looked good, and they published that. And this was one of the sort of tipping point scandals that got the journal editors and others to demand trial registration in which the pre-specified outcome measures would be made public. And in fact, later, as part of a lawsuit, an internal corporate email came out that said they swallowed our story hook, line, and sinker. And by they, I take that to mean all of us, the entire medical community, because it wasn't just the editor and peer reviewers at JAMA, it was actually all of the physicians who prescribed celecoxib, and basically they pulled one over on us. So when you think of levels of transparency, if you will, it goes all the way from the left side of this diagram to public knowledge that the trial exists, all the way to the right side, which is now under discussion, access to the full data set. So ClinicalTrials.gov, we talk about the blue parts, which is trial existence and the summary of the protocol details, and the orange part, if you will, the summary of results. So you can think about the trial reporting system as the combination of the systems like ClinicalTrials.gov and the policies that either require or incentivize the use of that system. So you think about prospective trial registration, so saying ahead of time that you're going to do this study and what the protocol requires you to do. Summary results reporting, which is the aggregate data that was pre-specified in your protocol. And then finally, individual participant data, or otherwise known these days as data sharing. So these are the definitions that I just gave you. So at this time, ClinicalTrials.gov has now it has over 210 registered studies. These include both interventional studies, otherwise known as clinical trials, and observational studies. We get about 500 new trials registered per week. Overall, the WHO runs a search portal for several clinical trial registries that has about 300,000 studies in it. And the total actual number of trials in the US and worldwide are not known because there are still a number of trials that are not registered anywhere. For summary results reporting, ClinicalTrials.gov now has the results for over 20,000 registered studies. And there's a law that requires reporting of results, and I'll get into that in a minute. This is just to point out that there are stages in the disclosure that parallel the research life cycle. So if you think about the research study on the left, starting with IRB review and approval of the protocol, all the way through to study completion and data analysis, you could see that you have to keep up your ClinicalTrials.gov record, if you will, at all stages, both starting with initial registration to updating the registry as needed, finally summary results reporting, and then any updates to the results database as necessary. So again, thinking about the purpose of ClinicalTrials.gov and other trial reporting systems, you need to think about the 4 categories of human subject protections, research integrity, evidence-based medicine, and allocation of resources. So current policies, which I will mostly leave the details to your reading, but there are 2 important policies. One is the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors, or ICMJE, which requires the registration of all interventional studies or clinical trials prior to enrollment of the first participant. And you need to do that in order to have your study eligible for publication in one of the journals. And then in the US, there's a law called FDA, or the FDA Amendments Act, which requires both registration and summary results reporting for certain trials of drugs and devices. So in addition, you can see on this slide, there's 3 columns, one for the ICMJE policy all the way on the right, one for FDA, which is over on the left, and then the middle policy is there's a draft NIH policy, which is expected to be finalized later this year, which also requires registration and results reporting for all clinical trials funded by the NIH, funded in whole or in part by NIH. So that's a broad policy which would require registration and results reporting, regardless of whether the study involves a drug or device. And you risk loss of NIH funding for you and your institution for lack of compliance with that policy. And here's a New England Journal article describing those policies. So at this time, we're expecting finalization of the rules for FDA and the NIH policy in about early fall, late summer, early fall of this coming year. So let's go to this. And the other point is that at this time, well, I can go back here, many people are writing articles talking about compliance with these policies. And in particular, here's a sample of 3 studies showing compliance with the policies. And you could see that this was a Stat News article that was focusing on academic medical centers. So a lot of previous attention was focused on industry, drug and device companies, and their relative lack of compliance. But recently, attention has been focused on recipients of NIH and other funders who fund research at academic medical centers, and that there basically is a spotlight being shined on failure to report. And here's another article looking at failure to report among academic medical centers. And this is getting a lot of attention in the US. Just to note that there are other policies besides the ones that I've mentioned. So let me tell you a little bit about ClinicalTrials.gov. This is what the homepage looks like. And registration. First of all, ClinicalTrials.gov permits the registration of any biomedical or health-related research study in humans. as long as it's conforming with any applicable human subject protections or ethics regulations and conformance with any other regulations. So we permit registration of studies from anywhere in the world funded by anybody. And these are the data that I alluded to before, where about 40,000 of the studies are observational studies, or sometimes known as natural history or epidemiologic studies, and the rest are interventional studies. The studies are from around the world, and nearly half have no sites at all in the US. Content of a ClinicalTrials.gov record. The concepts include that there's one record per trial. The registration record should be submitted at or prior to trial initiation. It summarizes information from the trial protocol and also includes recruitment information. The results record would be submitted after trial completion, and it summarizes trial results, and I'll show you more about that in a second. ClinicalTrials.gov provides for a public archive for records. Changes can and should be made to the records, but the changes are publicly tracked, so any member of the public can see when the change was made and what the change was. Points to consider for registration, and I'll just let you read about these in the book chapter. Importance of the protocol. The protocol is a research plan that includes pre-specified hypotheses, pre-specified methods, including explicitly defined variables of interest. The validity of any statistical analyses or conclusions is based on adherence to those pre-specified methods. So there's a lot of evidence that, especially in non-industry sites, there is a casualness of human experimentation where protocols are not written in a very detailed or thoughtful way, and that the actual conduct of the study is done in a somewhat casual way without strict adherence to the protocol. And this probably creates essentially invalid results. Registration provides a public summary of the protocol, and there are some efforts to standardize protocol items, including the SPIRIT initiative, and there's a reference in the book chapter. As I mentioned, information has to be kept up to date on ClinicalTrials.gov. Results reporting to ClinicalTrials.gov. So the results database, part of ClinicalTrials.gov, was launched in September 2008. The design was based on the law and informed by consort and other relevant standards. It requires the reporting of a minimum data set that was specified in the trial protocol. It's a tabular format with minimal narrative, and EMA, the European Medicines Agency, has developed a database based on our model. You can see on the left, these are little snippets of the types of tables that you would find in the results database. And it's basically consists of 4 scientific modules: participant flow, baseline characteristics, outcome measures, and adverse events. The key concepts include the fact that the basic results database requires the reporting of what was done. It does not require a change in study design or study procedures. And the intended audience is readers of the medical literature, somebody who might read a journal article. It is not intended to inform the lay public. However, the tables need to be informative with minimal narrative text. So the table should convey the design, conduct, and analysis of the data. It should have a logical table structure. The measures and the units should be consistent, and you need complete scale information so that somebody could understand it. So for example, if I just entered data for something called a Zarin scale without further detail, that would not be particularly informative because you wouldn't know what the Zarin scale was. Number of participants must be consistent across modules. For example, you can't have 200 people starting a study and then an outcome measure that consists of 300 people in it. Apparent validity, for example, 624 years cannot be the mean age of a sample. And we get incoherent entries all the time, which are caught by our quality control process, and here's some examples of them. For example, 36 eyeballs in a study of 14 people, or other measures that don't make any sense, as you can see here. So summarizing results is similar in complexity to preparation of results for a journal publication. This is not an administrative task, it's a scientific task. You must understand the study design and analytic plan. You must have a basic understanding of the principles of clinical trial conduct and analysis, and you must have access to necessary data to fill out these modules. Both ClinicalTrials.gov reporting and journals seek to report accurate and informative information. ClinicalTrials.gov reporting does not reject submissions. We don't reject based on whether or not the trial was a valid trial, an interesting trial, or anything else about the actual trial. We permit disclosure of all outcome measures, in fact require it, and we only have tabular data with minimal narrative. Peer-reviewed journal publications select quality research that's of interest to the readers, so they might reject an article because the trial was not interesting or they think there was something fundamentally flawed about the trial design. Editors may limit the focus of the report to only certain outcome measures, and there's narrative for providing context and conclusions. I'll leave this to the book chapter. And this is just to note that we usually get pushback with people saying, but we shouldn't have to do results reporting because everyone publishes all their papers. It's just industry that doesn't. And this was an article published in the BMJ showing a cohort of NIH-funded clinical trials that were registered in ClinicalTrials.gov. And after a total of 100 months from study start, from study completion, only about 2/3 of the trials were ever published. So basically about 1/3 of trials funded by NIH were never published, which means that the participation of the people in those studies was really wasted. And this is both an ethical and a scientific disaster. So just to note on the horizon, there's a lot of discussion of individual participant level data. You'll hear this, people will talk about data sharing. Here's an editorial which notes that the traditional system of relying on investigators, sponsors, and journal editors to decide whether, when, and how to report trial results was based on trust. And basically that trust has been violated. Skip this. And it's interesting to note what's the relationship between the raw data or the participant level data in a study and the analyzed summary data. So if you go from the left, which is the uncoded data that's initially collected, let's say the case report forms or the medical records, all the way to the right, which is the analyzed aggregate data that you'd see in ClinicalTrials.gov or a journal article. And you could see that at each step here, each theoretical, this is a sort of model, each step, decisions are being made to go from the uncoded to the abstracted data, from the abstracted to the coded, to the computerized, to the edited and cleaned, to the analyzable data set, and finally to the analyzed summary data. And there's a journey from the initial raw data to the final summary data. And what we found is that these decisions are mostly done in the dark. They don't provide an easy audit trail, and that different efforts to analyze the same data lead to different analyzed summary data. So there's not just one journey from the left, which is the raw data, to the right, which has led people to want access to the raw data to both validate it and to consider alternative mechanisms of analyzing the same data. So there have been many recent developments in the area of IPD, which stands for Individual Participant Level Data, including an Institute of Medicine report and a statement from the International Committee of Medical Journal Editors. Currently, let's just say there's a role for ClinicalTrials.gov to provide a framework and access to key trial information and to provide context for available information, though ClinicalTrials.gov does not have the participant level data and will not have it. It has just summary data. So here's an image of ClinicalTrials.gov as an informational scaffold where you can go to ClinicalTrials.gov, use the search engine, find the trials of interest, and find out which ones have which kind of information associated with them, with links to the information that's not in ClinicalTrials.gov itself. So now, at the request of the Institute of Medicine and the journal editors, there are some new data elements in ClinicalTrials.gov, which is asking at the time of registration whether there's a plan to share the data and what the plan will be. And the journal editors have a proposal out which would require that you complete that information to make your trial eligible for eventual publication. And then after study completion, there are data elements that would enable you to say what's available in the public domain and where, for example, the URL, one could find it. Because again, that data will not live at ClinicalTrials.gov, but links to that data can be at ClinicalTrials.gov. And this is what those look like. And you could see that we already now link to both external sites link to ClinicalTrials.gov, and ClinicalTrials.gov links to other sites. I'm going to skip this. So final thoughts are that ClinicalTrials.gov reflects the clinical research enterprise, the CRE. Its utility as a scientific tool depends on its accuracy and completeness, and your diligence in submitting accurate and timely reports will reflect on you, increasingly reflect on you, as both journalists and researchers actually study the quality and the quantity of reporting that both individual researchers are providing as well as institutions. And it will also reflect on the CRE. And here's a list of publications that might be of interest, and this list is also always available on ClinicalTrials.gov. And here's a list of links for additional information that might be of interest to some of you. So I can take questions from those people in the audience if you'd like. Or you can end there, and anyone who wants to ask me a question afterwards, feel free to come up. Thank you.